Story 1. The only jokes he made were digs at everyone, which was pretty annoying because he was an interesting guy. He just chose to be rude for the sake of humor. Story 2. Bob has always been somewhat unpleasant, but the last time I went out to dinner with him, it turned into 2 hours of conspiracy theories and the racial slur every 2 minutes. The people in the restaurant were quite shocked. I asked, "Hey, what's with the racial slur?" He replied, "Everybody in Texas talks like this." I said, "Bob, you're from Columbus, Wisconsin." Story 3. I had to step away from a friend. She kept putting herself in a terrible situation, not harmful to her thankfully, but in a toxic relationship with bad habits. It became so disheartening, and I couldn't sit around feeling useless to the situation. It was also bringing me down. Story 4. After I left my abusive ex, a friend asked if it was really that bad. Then, they followed it up by saying it was a shame he never got the psychological help he needed while we were together. That was the moment I realized the friendship was over. What a way to completely invalidate what I went through. Story 5. When he kept messaging me whenever he was bored, asking what he should do without wanting to hang out or call, I had to suggest activities like drawing or taking a walk. He was not self-sufficient at all and just could not seem to entertain himself. Story 6. My Laotian ex-girlfriend's father drove up to me in a blue van and offered me money to break up with her. Story 7. This girl was my friend for 6 years. I realized I needed to end the friendship when she created a social media account pretending to be me. Story 8. I am female. My best friend in high school was a guy in the grade below me. We were great friends, or so I thought. He asked me a few times over the years to sleep with him, and I always said no. I invited him to my wedding, but he said he wasn't going to come because he was going to hang out with his sister. He called me that Christmas to hang out, and I told him I was sick. We haven't spoken since, and it's been nearly a decade. It seems that he only wanted to be my friend if I was single. So I guess we weren't really great friends after all. Story 9. I ended the friendship when she committed to taking care of my cats, who were the most important part of my life, and then completely bailed. On the day she was supposed to show up, she didn't answer my calls or send a message. She finally appeared the next day at midnight. By then, I was furious because my cats had been left without food. Her response was that she was her own priority and that they were just simple cats. I couldn't find anyone else to help at that hour. What really hurt was that I had done many things for her, some I didn't even want to do just to be supportive. All I had asked from her was a 5-minute visit to feed the cats, and she could have said no from the beginning. For context, I'm not sure if I want children, and I've always said that my cats are my only family where I currently live. Story 10. A woman I knew and loved as a best friend for 18 years began sending me long messages criticizing every aspect of my life. I tolerated it for days, thinking it would stop, but it continued. When I complained about the verbal abuse on social media, she sent her husband to confront me. That was the final straw. I blocked both of them and told her she would be ignored from then on. I haven't heard from her since. Story 11. I found out through a mutual friend that she was having unprotected sex with dates and one-night stands, conveniently forgetting to take her birth control afterward. Did I mention she's absolutely desperate for kids? I have strong, often unpopular opinions on men's rights and equality. I feel she was essentially doing the female equivalent of stealthing. I have struggled to maintain any kind of friendship since. It's as if my own nervous system just rejects her. Story 12. Guy hit his girlfriend in my living room while we were all hanging out. I told him to leave my house. They left together. Story 13. When she made passive-aggressive remarks about how I was trying to steal her boyfriend while I was helping tutor him, she would always say she was joking, but it made me uncomfortable. Even her boyfriend told her that there was absolutely nothing going on between us. They broke up soon after, to no one's surprise. She was very insecure and controlling. Story 14. When everyone told me she was using me, my parents, husband, and grandmother said she loved me but hated that she couldn't give me the life she wanted for me. She had a stronghold on Christianity, so she would never act on her feelings. I always paid for our outings and drove us around. She became upset when I couldn't see her on her birthday. so she cut me off, and I never chased after her. Another friend I cut off stared at my husband too much. He even mentioned how uncomfortable it made him feel. She would do it even more when I left the room. Another friend cut ties with me because she got jealous when I made new friends at my new job. Another issue arose when she left her paid-off house to rent somewhere and work overtime to make ends meet. She wanted me to take care of her farm indefinitely. Coming from wealth, it felt odd to see someone willingly want to struggle. She had a house from inheritance, received a monthly check, and her mother would bring her groceries. Both her truck and SUV were paid off. I grew up poor, so her actions felt like a slap in the face. Story 15. I realized what I was looking for in that relationship at that time in my life. I could never find with her. We both were lost, clinging to each other. Story 16. A friend kept pushing her multi-level marketing ideas on me. I do not want to join. Whenever she would call or text, it was always, "Hi, how are you?" After I would respond, she would try to promote her company. I left her a message expressing how I disliked being viewed as her next target instead of as a friend. I have children, and she never asked how they were doing. Even after I told her no several times, she kept asking me to sign up. Eventually, I informed her that I did not see our friendship continuing and that I would block her on everything, wishing her all the best. We were very close before I moved for work, and we kept in contact through text and calls. That same year, an old friend who had cut ties with me 13 years ago reached out. There was too much hurt from how she ended things on my end to want to rebuild our relationship. I remember how she blamed me for everything that happened instead of the actual cause. Then she went silent and gave me the cold shoulder when we were in the same area. I told her that I did not mind being Facebook friends, but did not think we could ever go back to being friends. I told her that if she needed anything, she shouldn't hesitate to reach out. She explained that as she got older, she realized I did the right thing back then. She was like a sister to me. I am glad she is doing well with her own family. I used to wonder whether the incident affected her, but she seems to be thriving. Story 17. He invited me to a gathering at his apartment. Nothing special, just catching up and smoking a few joints with friends from high school. He and I have known each other since we were 16. We're now in our mid-30s. I noticed some new people I had never met. They seemed nice. In the middle of introducing myself, one of them started chopping up lines on the coffee table. I grabbed my stuff and haven't seen him since. In summary, we don't use the same substances anymore. Story 18. When I realized she had nothing nice to say about anyone behind their back, it made me question what she had to say about me. Story 19. When they started to experiment with opiates, my dad made sure I understood that opiates were a guaranteed way to ruin your life. I avoided them completely because they are a plague on humanity. 2 people died from overdoses, 1 died from a self-inflicted gunshot, 1 is now a wanted murderer for a carjacking, and 2 died while attempting to rob another user. Every single one of those individuals was warned that they did not want to get involved with those substances. Story 20. I saw a friend I hadn't seen in about 5 years. I went to school while he stayed in our hometown. When we met up, he had a tongue ring and began writing disturbing horror stories. I ended the friendship after that. Story 21. I became completely sick of him telling lies. He would say one thing to me and something completely different to the person next to me. His poor wife would just roll her eyes and later tell me the truth. Story 22. He went on my bachelor party weekend and had severe withdrawals from heroin. I didn't know he was an addict. I knew he was into drugs, but didn't realize how deep he was into it. He was sick the entire time. He was also really broke and asked my friends for money to do almost any activity. I paid for his flight and the room with promises that he would pay me back, which he did. I didn't cut him off because of this trip, but when we got back home, he just got worse. He hurt a lot of our mutual friends, but not me. However, I started a family and bought a house, so I couldn't have him around anymore. I went to his oldest brother's funeral recently, and he is in the same situation. Addicted to drugs and in trouble with the law. He is currently in jail. It's just sad. Story 23. When that neighbor tried to blame everything on my child, it happened 2 weeks ago and I am still angry about it. Story 24. I was friends with a girl who had boyfriends throughout high school while I never had a relationship, which I was fine with. However, when I met my now husband in my sophomore year of college, she became strangely jealous and actively tried to persuade me to break up with him by claiming he did drugs and was violent, which he was not. When that did not work, she attempted to get her mother to convince me to end the relationship. Eventually, I decided to distance myself. Once our younger brothers, who were also friends, graduated high school and drifted apart, it became easier not to communicate with her. Over time, we lost contact. She married someone in the military and seems happy. I am also married with a child. We were not invited to each other's weddings. She appears to be doing well and runs a legitimate business, not a multi-level marketing scheme, so I wish her the best. Story 25. When he told me he only became friends with me in hopes of us going further, and was hoping that I would eventually sleep with him, I still feel heartbroken over this experience, even though it's been well over a decade. I genuinely thought we were just close friends and that we had amazing chemistry together. Story 26. For a few friends, it was their toxic relationships with partners that opened my eyes to how some people struggle and fail to develop communication skills beyond what immediately serves them. Instead of communicating honestly and directly with those close to them, they would lie, manipulate, and position themselves as the victim in any situation. As we got older, it was difficult for me to watch that behavior, and more than anything, I felt embarrassed to call them friends. That's when I knew it was time. Story 27. In my case, it's the entire friend group I needed to cut off. You know what the worst kind of friendship is? The one where you let fights, misunderstandings, and any bad blood persist. That's what happened in my friend group. Though I prefer to talk things out and communicate feelings properly, my friends didn't seem to like that. Whenever something happened between them, and this doesn't necessarily mean it included me, they'd pretend to be okay. Sure, they would talk negatively about the person, but they'd act fine. They just swallowed it down like it was nothing. But this is a problem. Whenever the person they're upset with makes a minor inconvenience, the bitter feelings rise again, and they express all the hate. They can be very petty about it. They make you feel left out and uncomfortable on purpose. They talk loudly in a direction that makes you feel bad and even befriend someone you don't like, discussing you with them. This happened to me, but afterward, when things were mended, they dropped the person I disliked and started talking negatively about her to me. Overall, it's a very immature and toxic friend group that I'm surrounded by. I'm just glad we're going our separate ways now. Story 28. Racism, but only when they are under the influence, as they lack the courage to express those views without alcohol. Story 29. I had a fun coworker, and we would hang out often. However, she constantly lied about everything. Being freshly out of high school, I brushed it off because we had a great time together. She was getting married and asked me to spend a week with her, 2 states over, to help with wedding planning and shopping for decorations and her dress. So, I took an entire week off my $7.25 job. At the first gas station, she asked if we could split the gas. There was no mention of this beforehand. Her family and I went out to dinner, and when the waiter asked, her mom replied, 2 checks, please. I was 19 and broke. They couldn't pay for my $8 meal. My wedding was a month after hers, and she ghosted me almost instantly after her wedding. She didn't even show up to my wedding. No text, no phone calls, no explanation. I didn't expect to pay my entire way as a bridesmaid to help her with her wedding. My parents ended up helping me with my rent and groceries, as this was clearly not in my budget. Story 30. We have grown into different people. He is a wonderful person, a good husband, and a good father. Our interests, values, and activities we enjoy discussing have changed. We no longer have anything in common. Story 31. I experienced a strong case of mimetic desire. Whenever I liked someone, others pursued them as well. I was constantly looking over my shoulder and second-guessing what I shared. I often felt judged and in competition with others, as if they were always trying to one-up me. Goodbye. Story 32. She made me feel guilty for visiting a long-term internet friend for the first time instead of giving her that money. Story 33. When we went out for drinks, I offered to contribute, and she told me it was fine. Then she complained to someone else that I had taken advantage of her. But the bartender confirmed I had made an offer. She tried to apologize and I blocked her. Story 34. When I was suddenly not invited to anything but received texts at the end of the night from her, trying to appease me, I discovered she was with a group of people who were talking negatively about me. She felt guilty about it and attempted to save face. These were friends I believed were my friends too, whom she had introduced me to. I asked her about these situations multiple times, but there was always a different answer or story. I gradually detached myself and eventually, I had enough and blocked her and all my other friends from her circle. Story 35. When I had to ask if I was crazy or if I was actually a bad person, I provided examples of instances where I had been wronged. Story 36. When they did something that got them in trouble with the law, they lied and said we couldn't be friends if I stayed friends with the people who informed the authorities about what had happened. Story 37. When I mentioned that I had stopped using cocaine and wanted to remain sober, she told me to go ahead because it wasn't a big deal. Story 38. He became an irresponsible father. He never paid child support and would drink or use drugs when he saw his children. I confronted him about it and did not speak to him again. Story 39. She only contacts me when she needs something. When I try to arrange a catch-up, she doesn't respond or even look at the message for days or weeks. Forget it. Story 40. When our values gradually became incompatible, she turned into a source of toxicity and negativity. She wasn't doing well in her romantic life, and it was all due to her own wrongdoings, yet she was completely incapable of realizing that. She expected far more than she could give in return and blamed it on the men she dated. For example, early in the dating phase, she would drop hints about expensive things she desired, and when the guy didn't open his wallet, she would claim he was poor and cheap. She wanted things like international travel and remodeling her apartment. She began focusing on dating married men because she wanted her freedom, believing married men were less involved in her life. However, she became terribly upset when she sought their attention and they had to prioritize their families. For instance, she broke up with a guy because she asked him to pick her up on a rainy day, and he said he couldn't because he had to pick up his daughter from school. She also ended things with another guy because he had to spend Christmas with his family instead of with her. She claimed she wasn't interested in marriage because it isn't that big of an accomplishment to secure a partner. Yet when one of her coworkers got engaged, she gossiped about it for months. Even when I pointed out that she spent an absurd amount of time discussing something she claimed to have no interest in, she still didn't connect the dots. It wasn't all bad. She was a good friend with some shortcomings, but unfortunately, those shortcomings were a deal breaker for me. Story 41. It started when I told my then best friend that I had a crush on someone. My crush and I were on good talking terms and mostly spent our time talking to each other. My friend and I were living in different cities, so I showed him a picture of the girl, and he said I should make my move. I replied that I would do so in time. Nobody in my college knew about it, and one day, by chance, I was video calling him, and he literally made my roommate take my phone away and was about to tell him. As time went on and he became too insistent on it, calling me repeatedly and messaging me to tell her, he even asked me for her Instagram ID, saying he would tell her for me. I said no but gave him the ID. He started talking to her, despite my request not to. He then told me that she was a loose woman and pointed out how friendly she had become with him, even though I was not in college. He said that she wanted to get on a call with the three of us and talk. Felt very strange, but I agreed. The girl and I argued over something I don't remember well, and we agreed not to speak with each other again. I later found out that he had told my crush that I was an overconfident jerk who didn't care about others and that she should stop talking to me. I cut off all communication with my then best friend, vowing never to speak to him again. Story 42. I thought it was my first genuine friendship. I told her that if I ever had a child, she would be the godmother. She was incredibly happy about that. Then I got pregnant, and I no longer existed to her. Story 43. I ended a friendship because I caught her manipulating me into ending my relationship with a guy I liked, just because I was not available all the time anymore. She even used our friend group to put pressure on me. Meeting twice a week was not enough for her, and she tried to invite herself into our date nights. It was a long-distance relationship back then, so I met him just once every 2 weeks. While she completely ignored me for months every time she had a guy, she accused me of being too clingy and needy when I asked after a few months if she could make time for me. I let her double standards slide, but the manipulation ultimately destroyed the friendship. Story 44, one of my first internet friends, close for about a decade. I eventually realized that every message she sent began with I, even in the middle of conversations, replies to anything I sent or when making plans. She didn't care about anything to do with me. Story 45. I was accused by someone malicious, with whom she was also friends, of having said something about another member of our group whom I was close to. This person would instigate situations where I was present, and the individual I supposedly spoke about would confront me after being told what I allegedly said. This occurred on 3 separate occasions until I realized what was happening. One person being malicious and the other setting up scenarios after having believed her. That's when I understood that a true friend would defend me, not believe and be cruel to me by setting me up. When the malicious individual moved away, this behavior stopped, and the other person apologized, realizing we had both been manipulated. I ended the friendship then. In the meantime, I had suffered unnecessary heartache over losing friends I was supposed to have said something about and felt hurt that the other person believed I was capable of saying such things. I lost my social life all at once. I no longer go out or have any friends. Story 46. They borrowed money and never paid it back. They were misogynistic and admitted to domestic abuse of their girlfriend. Story 47. When they continued to make anti-trans statements despite being told multiple times that I found such talk offensive, especially since I have a family member who is transgender. Story 48. When toxicity began, there was too much attention demanded, making it seem like I didn't have my own responsibilities. Story 49. When he started driving to my house to sit outside at night and then spend 2 hours driving back to work and after work back to mine, I felt overwhelmed. This was in response to me saying I needed some space because I had been telling him for years I had no interest in him, but he clearly liked me. I couldn't act freely because every micro movement would either make him or break him. It was too much pressure. After he pressured me into visiting for my birthday, despite my saying no because it was too close to my moving, he kept insisting, so we went out drinking. I got extremely drunk, and we slept together. I needed space to sort things out, but he stalked me in response, turning that temporary space into a permanent one. Thankfully, he stopped before long, but it was still the last straw that made me not leave the house for 4 years. Story 50. When their persistent unhappiness and dissatisfaction with their life started impacting my own happiness and making me feel inadequate, I began questioning how I could be happy with what I had if it was not enough for them. After about a year and a half, I realized that they must find their own happiness, and I no longer need to be influenced by their views. I am enough, I have accomplished enough, and I am happy. Story 51. I told a mutual friend that I had fallen into a deep interest in Jordan Peterson, had become very right-wing, and started expressing a lot of misogynistic ideas. The surprising part? The mutual friend they informed is not only someone I have known for over 20 years, but is also transgender. Story 52. I was joined at the hip with a girl for years. She always displayed small red flag behaviors, but I was too young to recognize them. She came from a very wealthy family, while I did not. Now I realized she liked the fact that I lived in her shadow. When we were 17, she got a brand new car, and I was so happy for her. We celebrated and had a lot of fun. When it was time for me to get a car at 21, after working hard for it and being excited, she didn't show up to congratulate me or share in my happiness. Instead, she was annoyed that my car was newer, as it was several years later, and her car was older. The day after, I had an incredible moment of clarity. I deleted her from my social media accounts and never spoke to her again. When I told people we were no longer friends, they responded with relief, saying they always thought she wasn't a very nice person, and it didn't match with me. That solidified my decision. There were many similar micro-incidents leading up to this. For example, if we went to a club and men were interested in me instead of her, she would ignore and sulk for the rest of the night. The next day, she would pretend nothing happened. Sorry for my trauma dump. Story 53. What is your most important thing? For some, it is socioeconomic circles. For others, it is vices or charisma, being part of the popular crowd. For me, it is loyalty. I am loyal to a fault. If they are not there for me like I am there for them, I cut them off. Story 54. When I started dreading expressing my feelings or discussing my problems, or complaining about her mean and disrespectful behavior, she would often turn the situation around, making me feel like I was in the wrong. I had to deal with her cold shoulder and passive-aggressive comments. I finally drew the line when she put me second to a group of men who clearly hated her and treated her poorly. Story 55. We made plans for them to come over for dinner. They had several dietary restrictions that I was careful to adhere to, and I was proud of what I made. Cooking is my passion, and making food for people is my favorite thing to do. However, they never showed up. For hours later, they called to say they forgot. I felt hurt and offended. Story 56. We made plans for them to come over for dinner, and they had many dietary restrictions that I was careful to adhere to. I was proud of what I prepared. Cooking is my passion, and making food for people is my favorite thing to do. However, they never showed up. For hours later, they called to say they had forgotten. I felt hurt and offended. Story 57. She spent years burdening me with her trauma while expecting me to be her mental health counselor. I couldn't say no to her and ended up engaging in reactive abuse by making negative comments about her appearance, for which I am not proud. Although I apologized, learned, and grew, she continued to hold it over me for months. She often instigated fights under the guise of setting boundaries and standing up for herself, using therapeutic language to manipulate me while criticizing me for not understanding her needs as an autistic individual. I finally took what was meant to be a short break from her, and she responded with the most verbally abusive message I have ever received, worse than my verbally abusive childhood. That was the breaking point for me. Codependent or not, there was no way I would ever be her friend again. Now, months later, she is calling and texting me and my mother from a different phone number, expressing how she cries every day thinking about me. Story 58. She became deeply involved in COVID conspiracy theories and could not discuss anything else. She was rude and aggressive if anyone tried to change the topic or asked her to stop. Eventually, she neglected and mistreated her children in the name of stockpiling food, underfeeding them and locking them in their rooms when they tried to sneak food at night. I reported her to Children's Services, and that ended a friendship of over 30 years. Story 59. We were having a conversation with another person, and things slowly heated into a debate. Throughout the discussion, she kept interrupting both of us, trying to change the subject and pushing the conversation further away from civility. After being cut off repeatedly, I became annoyed and finally interrupted her while she was speaking. That was when she abruptly said, "We all just need to calm down." Even as she continued to interrupt our other friend, I stepped away from her that day and never responded to her apology or anything else. I didn't delete or block her anywhere. I simply took a step back. It was the best decision of my life. Story 60. Two friendships come to mind. One was the iconic situation of a girl entering a friend group. She completely disrupted my entire friend group, turning everyone against each other. I was singled out because I told them not to bring their relationship drama into the friend circle. They would get mad at each other and then take it out on me. My other friendship ended when I told them I did not want to be in an open relationship because they were younger than 2 years. They kept making advances and being persistent. They were technically only 3 years younger than me, but I have that boundary in place because I'm just not about that life. Story 61. I recently ended my relationship with a close sibling. Her self-involvement and dishonesty were too much to endure. Story 62. When she disappeared for a year while I was chronically ill, she later sent 2 hours of voice messages talking about herself without asking how I had been. We had been friends for almost 20 years. I addressed the situation in a kind manner, but never heard back from her. I suppose I never truly ended it. But the moment I stated that her behavior was unacceptable and set a boundary, she withdrew. Story 63. When she said I didn't know what it was like to have to work because I live rent-free, I was frustrated. I do work 50 hours a week, and I am also a full-time caregiver for my elderly father. That is not at all the same as living at home and relying on one's parents. Our entire friendship revolved around her. We only did things she wanted to do and ate where she preferred. She would call and discuss her problems for 20 to 30 minutes before even asking how I was. This happened every time we talked, not just when she needed to vent. She would forget my work hours and call me while I was working. I would inform her that I was going out of town or would be unavailable. Yet she would call anyway and say she forgot about my plans. That was because she never listened to what I said. Overall, I don't miss her, as she was more of a burden than a friend. Story 64. She was so busy being jealous of my life that she would forget I was a real person with feelings. It was getting unsettling. Story 65. She tried to convince my husband not to marry me because she said it wasn't fair that I was getting married before her. A good Christian girl waiting for marriage. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.